The scream cut through the dry afternoon air like a blade through leather, stopping Owen Jameson dead in his tracks as he led his exhausted mare toward what he hoped might be water. He had been riding for 3 days straight across the harsh New Mexico territory in July of 1877, tracking a herd of wild horses that had broken through his employer's fence line. And the last thing he expected to find in this God-forsaken stretch of rocky desert between Oro Grande and the Mexican border was another human soul, let alone one in such obvious distress. Owen was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of hard ranch work, with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands that knew rope and leather better than anything soft. He had never been one to turn away from trouble, even when common sense told him he should. And that scream, raw and desperate and unmistakably female, pulled him forward like a rope around his chest. He dropped his mare's reins, knowing she was too tired to wander far, and ran toward the sound, his boots kicking up dust as he scrambled over the rocky terrain. What he found made his heart slam against his ribs with a force that nearly knocked the wind from his lungs. A woman lay in the shade of a massive boulder, her dark hair plastered to her face with sweat, her body contorted with pain. A wagon sat nearby, one wheel completely shattered, the wood splintered beyond any hope of repair. 2 mules grazed a short distance away, seemingly unconcerned with their owner's plight. "Help me," the woman gasped, her eyes wild with fear and pain as they locked onto Owen's face. "Please, the baby is coming." Owen felt his blood turn to ice in his veins. He had helped birth calves and foals more times than he could count, had even assisted when his sister-in-law had her baby back in Kansas 5 years ago, but this was different. This woman was alone, miles from anywhere, and the terror in her eyes told him there was no time to waste. "I am here now," Owen said, forcing his voice to remain steady even as his mind raced. "My name is Owen. What is your name?" "Nora," she panted, another contraction seizing her body. "Nora Vaughn. I was traveling to meet my husband in Oro Grande, but the wheel broke, and then the pains started, and I cannot stop them." Owen knelt beside her, assessing the situation with the same careful attention he would give to any crisis on the range. Nora's dress was already hiked up around her knees, soaked with sweat and other fluids he tried not to think too hard about. Her face was flushed red, her breathing coming in short, desperate gasps. "How long have you been laboring?" he asked, already looking around for anything that might help. He spotted a canteen near the wagon and lunged for it, bringing it back to press against her lips. "Since dawn," Nora whispered after drinking deeply. "The wheel broke at first light and the pain started right after. I tried to ride one of the mules, but I could not even stand. I thought I would die out here alone." "You are not going to die," Owen said firmly, with more confidence than he felt. "I am going to help you through this. Have you had children before?" Nora shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "This is my first. My husband and I only married 6 months ago, back in Missouri. He came out here first to establish a homestead, and I was supposed to meet him. But now everything has gone wrong, and he does not even know where I am." Another contraction hit, and Nora's scream echoed off the rocks around them. Owen had never felt so helpless in his entire life, but he pushed the feeling aside and focused on what needed to be done. He had water, he had his knife, and he had 2 hands that had pulled countless creatures into this world. It would have to be enough. The next hour passed in a blur of heat and desperation. Owen worked with single-minded focus, following instincts he did not even know he possessed. He talked to Nora constantly, keeping her focused, encouraging her to breathe, to push, to hold on just a little longer. The sun beat down mercilessly, and he used his own body to shade her as much as possible, ignoring the way his shirt soaked through with sweat. Nora was stronger than she looked. Despite her fear, despite the pain that had to be unbearable, she followed his instructions, gripping his hand with a strength that left marks on his skin. Owen found himself admiring her courage, the set of her jaw, the determination in her eyes even when she had to be terrified. "I can see the head," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion he could not quite name. "You are almost there, Nora, just a few more pushes." "I cannot," Nora sobbed, her strength finally seeming to fail. "I have nothing left." "Yes, you can," Owen insisted, gripping her hand tighter. "Look at me, Nora. Look at me. You are the strongest woman I have ever met, and you are going to meet your baby in just a few more minutes. Your baby who needs you to be strong just a little longer." Something in his words, or maybe in his eyes, seemed to reach her. Nora took a shuddering breath and bore down with everything she had left. Owen caught the baby as it emerged, slippery and perfect and wailing with impressive lung power. It was a boy, red-faced and furious at being thrust into the bright, hot world. "You have a son," Owen said, his voice breaking despite his best efforts. He used his knife to cut the cord, tying it off the way he had seen done before, then wrapped the baby in his own shirt before placing him in Nora's trembling arms. Nora looked down at her son, and the expression on her face was something Owen knew he would remember for the rest of his life. Pure love, pure wonder, mixed with exhaustion and relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I am your mother. You are safe now." Owen sat back on his heels, his entire body shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. He had done it. The baby was alive, Nora was alive, and against all odds, everything had turned out all right. But even as relief washed over him, he knew their troubles were far from over. "Nora," he said gently, "I need to get you to a midwife. There are things that need to be checked, things I do not know how to do. The nearest town is Oro Grande, about 15 miles north." "Can you tell me where your husband is?" "He has a homestead outside of town," Nora said, her voice weak but steady. "On the eastern edge near the river bend. His name is Samuel Vaughn, but I cannot ride 15 miles like this." "I know," Owen assured her. "I am going to ride hard for Oro Grande and bring back help. I will leave you my canteen and my rifle. There is shade here and your mules for company. I will be back before nightfall with a midwife and a proper wagon. I promise you." Nora's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "You promise? You will not just leave me here?" Owen met her eyes, seeing the fear there, the vulnerability of a woman who had just given birth alone in the desert with only a stranger for help. Something shifted in his chest, something he could not quite identify but felt nonetheless. "I promise," he said solemnly. "I will come back for you, both of you." He made sure Nora was as comfortable as possible, positioning her in the deepest shade with the baby nestled safely in her arms. He left her his canteen, his rifle, and even his bedroll from his saddle. Then he mounted his tired mare and rode north like the devil himself was on his heels. The mare, despite her exhaustion, seemed to sense the urgency and found reserves of strength Owen had not known she possessed. They covered the 15 miles in just under 2 hours, the landscape blurring past as Owen pushed both himself and his horse to their limits. When the dusty streets of Oro Grande finally came into view, Owen felt like shouting with relief. Oro Grande was a small but growing town, typical of the New Mexico settlements springing up in the wake of the war and the expansion westward. It had a main street lined with wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, a church, and most importantly for Owen's purposes, a doctor's office with a sign that advertised midwifery services. Owen practically fell off his horse in front of the building, stumbling through the door with such force that he startled the elderly woman sitting behind a desk. "I need a midwife," Owen gasped, his chest heaving. "Now. There is a woman about 15 miles south who just gave birth alone. She needs help." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Henderson, sprang into action with efficiency that spoke of years of experience. Within minutes, she had gathered supplies, commandeered a wagon from the livery, and recruited the town doctor, a thin man named Dr. Phillips, to accompany them. "We should also locate her husband," Mrs. Henderson said as they prepared to leave. "You said her name is Nora Vaughn." "Yes, and her husband is Samuel Vaughn. He has a homestead on the eastern edge of town near the river bend." Mrs. Henderson's face lit with recognition. "I know the place. Young fellow came through here about 3 months back, bought supplies and headed out to build. Said his wife would be joining him soon. Poor man has been waiting at the stage station every week." They sent word with a boy who worked at the livery, instructing him to fetch Samuel Vaughn and bring him south to meet them on the trail. Then, Owen climbed into the wagon beside Dr. Phillips, and they set off at the fastest pace the horses could manage while still pulling the heavy wagon. The journey back felt interminable. Owen could not shake the image of Nora alone with her newborn son, vulnerable to the elements and whatever dangers might lurk in the desert. He had promised her he would return, and the weight of that promise sat heavy on his shoulders. "You did a brave thing," Dr. Phillips said as they rattled along the rough trail. "Most men would have panicked in that situation." Owen shook his head. "I just did what needed doing. Anyone would have done the same." "You would be surprised," Mrs. Henderson said from the back of the wagon. "I have seen strong men faint at the sight of childbirth. The fact that you stayed calm and helped that woman through it speaks to your character." Owen did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing, focusing instead on scanning the horizon for the distinctive boulder formation where he had left Nora. When it finally came into view, he felt his heart leap into his throat. What if something had gone wrong in his absence? What if she had started bleeding, or the baby had taken a turn? But when they arrived, Nora was exactly where he had left her, looking pale and exhausted but alive. The baby was nursing, and she looked up at the sound of the wagon with such relief in her eyes that Owen felt his chest tighten. "I told you I would come back," he said, jumping down from the wagon before it had fully stopped. "I believed you," Nora replied, and the simple trust in those words hit Owen harder than any physical blow. Mrs. Henderson took over with brisk efficiency, shooing Owen away while she examined both mother and baby. Dr. Phillips assisted, checking vital signs and asking questions in a calm, professional manner. Owen busied himself with watering the horses and trying not to pace like a nervous father himself. They were just finishing up when another rider appeared on the horizon, pushing his horse hard. Owen recognized the desperation in the way the man rode and knew, without being told, that this had to be Samuel Vaughn. The reunion was everything Owen expected it to be. Samuel practically threw himself off his horse, running to Nora's side with tears streaming down his face. He gathered his wife and new son into his arms, his shoulders shaking with sobs of relief and joy. "I thought I had lost you," Samuel kept saying. "When the stage did not arrive and no one knew where you were, I thought the worst." "We are safe," Nora assured him, her own tears flowing freely. "Owen found us. He saved us both." Samuel turned to Owen then, his face a mix of gratitude and emotion so raw it was hard to look at directly. He was a few years younger than Owen, maybe 24, with the kind of soft hands that spoke of a man still adjusting to frontier life. "I do not know how to thank you," Samuel said, gripping Owen's hand with both of his own. "You saved my family. If there is anything at all I can ever do for you, you only have to ask." "No thanks needed," Owen replied, uncomfortable with the attention. "I am just glad I was there when they needed help." They loaded Nora and the baby, who she had decided to name Daniel, into the wagon for the journey back to Oro Grande. Samuel rode alongside, never taking his eyes off his wife and son. Owen brought up the rear on his mare, leading Nora's 2 mules behind him. As they traveled, Owen found his eyes drawn again and again to the wagon ahead, to the glimpse of dark hair he could see when Nora shifted position. He told himself he was just checking to make sure she was all right, that his concern was purely that of one human being for another. But something about the way his chest tightened when he looked at her suggested it might be more complicated than that. They reached Oro Grande just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Samuel's homestead was indeed on the eastern edge of town, a modest but well-built cabin with a barn and a small corral. It was clear Samuel had been working hard to prepare a home for his family. Mrs. Henderson insisted on staying the night to monitor Nora and the baby, and Dr. Phillips made plans to check in the following day. Owen helped Samuel carry Nora inside. Settling her on the bed, Samuel had obviously spent considerable time and care building. It had a real mattress, stuffed with what looked like new straw and covered with clean linens. "You should stay for supper," Samuel insisted as Owen prepared to leave. "It is the least I can do. We have supplies and I am a decent cook." Owen knew he should refuse. He had his own job to get back to, horses to track, responsibilities he had already neglected for an entire day. But when Nora added her voice to Samuel's, looking up at him with those dark eyes that seemed to see right through him, he found himself agreeing. The meal was simple but hearty: beans and cornbread with salt pork, washed down with strong coffee. Samuel talked enthusiastically about his plans for the homestead, the crops he wanted to plant, the livestock he hoped to raise. Nora listened with obvious affection, occasionally adding her own thoughts or gently tempering Samuel's more ambitious ideas with practical concerns. Owen found himself watching the way they interacted, the easy affection between them, and felt a strange hollowness in his chest. He had never given much thought to marriage or family, too focused on work and survival to consider such things. But seeing Samuel and Nora together, seeing the way they looked at their newborn son, something in him ached for a connection he had never known he was missing. He left after supper, declining Samuel's offer to sleep in the barn. He needed to get back to the ranch, to report what had happened and face whatever consequences came from abandoning his assignment to help a stranger. But as he rode through the darkness, he could not shake the image of Nora's face, the trust in her eyes when she had looked at him. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Owen's employer, a gruff but fair man named Mr. Peterson, was surprisingly understanding about the delay once he heard the full story. The wild horses had been located by other ranch hands, and while Owen felt guilty about not being there, he could not bring himself to regret his choice. He told himself he would not ride back into Oro Grande, that there was no reason to check on Nora and her family. They were fine, settled in their home with Samuel to care for them. Owen's part in their story was finished, but 3 days after leaving them, Owen found himself making excuses to ride into town for supplies the ranch did not really need. And somehow his route took him past the eastern edge of town, right by Samuel Vaughan's homestead. Samuel was outside working on expanding the corral when Owen rode up. His face split into a wide grin when he recognized his visitor. "Owen, I am so glad you came by. Nora was just saying this morning that she hoped we would see you again. Come inside, please. She will be thrilled." Owen allowed himself to be led inside, where he found Nora sitting in a rocking chair near the window, baby Daniel asleep in her arms. She looked much better than the last time he had seen her, color back in her cheeks, her hair clean and neatly braided. "Owen," she said warmly, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "I hoped you would come. I wanted to thank you properly, now that I am not quite so addled." "There is no need," Owen started, but Nora cut him off with a shake of her head. "There is every need. You saved my life and my son's life. That is not something I will ever forget or take lightly." They talked for over an hour, comfortable conversation that flowed easily despite the unusual circumstances of their meeting. Owen learned that Nora was 23, that she had been a school teacher back in Missouri, before marrying Samuel. She had a quick mind and a sharp wit that she tempered with kindness, and Owen found himself genuinely enjoying her company in a way that had nothing to do with the dramatic nature of their first encounter. Samuel clearly adored his wife and was proud of his new son, but Owen noticed things that gave him pause. The way Samuel talked over Nora sometimes, or dismissed her suggestions with a patronizing pat on the hand. The way he seemed more interested in his own plans and dreams than in asking Nora about hers. Small things, subtle things, but they nagged at Owen nonetheless. He told himself it was none of his business. Every marriage had its own dynamics, its own way of working. Just because it was not how Owen would do things did not mean it was wrong. But when he left that day, he caught himself looking back at the cabin, at the window where he could see Nora's silhouette, and that strange ache in his chest returned. The visits became more frequent. Owen told himself he was just checking on them, making sure Nora and the baby were truly all right. Samuel certainly seemed to welcome his presence, often putting Owen to work helping with various projects around the homestead. Owen was happy to help, using the physical labor as an excuse for why he kept coming back. But the truth, which he was trying very hard not to acknowledge, was that he came back to see Nora. She was unlike any woman he had ever known. Intelligent and well-read, she could discuss everything from literature to politics to practical matters of running a homestead. She was also kind, with a gentle humor that made even difficult days seem lighter. And when she smiled at him, really smiled with her whole face, Owen felt like he could take on the world. 2 months after Daniel's birth, Owen arrived at the homestead to find Nora outside hanging laundry, the baby sleeping in a basket at her feet. Samuel was nowhere to be seen. "He rode into town for supplies," Nora explained when Owen asked. "He should be back by evening." Owen knew he should leave. Being alone with another man's wife was improper at best, dangerous at worst. But when Nora asked him to stay for coffee, he found himself agreeing before his better judgment could kick in. They sat on the porch, watching the desert landscape shimmer in the afternoon heat. Daniel woke and fussed, and Nora nursed him unselfconsciously while they talked. Owen tried not to stare, tried not to think about how natural and right she looked with a baby in her arms. "Can I ask you something?" Nora said after a long, comfortable silence. "Of course." "Why do you keep coming back? I am grateful, do not misunderstand. I enjoy your visits. But I cannot help wondering why a man like you, with no obligations to us, continues to spend so much time here." Owen did not know how to answer that. How could he explain what he did not fully understand himself? That he was drawn to her in a way that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. That he thought about her constantly, wondered what she was doing, if she was happy, if she ever thought about him the way he thought about her. "I suppose I feel responsible," he finally said, which was not entirely a lie. "I helped bring Daniel into the world. That creates a bond, does not it?" Nora studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. "Is that all it is?" Owen met her gaze, and something passed between them, something electric and dangerous and undeniable. For a moment, he thought about telling her the truth, that he had fallen in love with her somewhere between that first scream in the desert and now. That the thought of her with Samuel made him burn with jealousy he had no right to feel. That he dreamed about her every night and woke up aching for something he could never have. But he did not say any of that. Instead, he looked away and changed the subject, and the moment passed. Samuel returned home that evening while Owen was helping repair a section of fence that had come loose. He was in good spirits, excited about news he had heard in town about new settlers arriving and opportunities for selling produce and livestock. "The town is growing faster than anyone expected," Samuel said enthusiastically over supper. "In a few years, this could be a real city. We are going to do well here, Nora. I can feel it." Nora smiled and nodded, but Owen noticed it did not quite reach her eyes. He wondered if she was happy here, in this isolated homestead with a husband who seemed more interested in his dreams of prosperity than in his wife's needs. As September turned to October, Owen's visits continued, though he began to notice tension between Samuel and Nora. They did not fight exactly, but there was a distance growing between them that worried Owen. Samuel was often distracted, focused on his plans and projects to the exclusion of nearly everything else. Nora seemed to grow quieter, more withdrawn. One afternoon in late October, Owen arrived to find Nora crying on the porch, Daniel asleep inside. She tried to hide it when she saw him, wiping her eyes quickly and forcing a smile. "I am fine," she said before he could ask. "Just a difficult day." Owen sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "You do not have to pretend with me." Nora let out a shaky breath. "Samuel and I had an argument. A silly thing, really. He wants to buy more land, expand the homestead, and I suggested we wait until we are more established. He accused me of not believing in him, of not supporting his ambitions." She laughed bitterly. "I left everything I knew to come out here and support his ambitions, but that is not enough, apparently." Owen felt anger rise in his chest at the thought of Samuel making Nora cry, but he pushed it down. "Marriage is complicated. I am sure he did not mean it." "Maybe," Nora said softly. "Or maybe he just sees me as an accessory to his grand plans rather than a partner." She turned to look at Owen, her eyes red from crying but clear and direct. "Do you know what the worst part is? Sometimes I think about the day Daniel was born, about how I was so scared and alone and then you appeared. And I think about how safe I felt with you there, even in the middle of giving birth in the desert. I have not felt that safe since." Owen's heart hammered in his chest. He knew he should say something appropriate, something that would redirect this conversation away from the dangerous territory it was entering. Instead, he found himself reaching out and taking her hand. "You deserve to feel safe," he said quietly. "You deserve to be cherished and listened to and treated like the incredible woman you are." Nora's breath caught. "Owen." The sound of hoofbeats interrupted whatever she had been about to say. They sprang apart, both of them flushed and guilty, though nothing had actually happened. Samuel rode into the yard, and if he noticed anything amiss, he did not comment on it. But that night, as Owen rode back to the ranch, he knew things could not continue as they were. He was falling deeper in love with another man's wife, and that way led only to heartbreak and betrayal. He needed to stop visiting, needed to cut ties cleanly before anyone got hurt worse than they already were. He stayed away for 2 weeks, throwing himself into ranch work with single-minded intensity. He took every extra shift, volunteered for the hardest jobs, anything to keep his mind off Nora. It did not work. She haunted his thoughts, his dreams, his every waking moment. He was checking fence line in a remote section of the ranch when Samuel Vaughn found him. Owen's first thought was that something had happened to Nora or Daniel, and panic seized his chest. Are they all right? He demanded before Samuel had even dismounted. Samuel looked surprised by the question. Yes, they are fine, physically anyway, but I need to talk to you about something, and I did not want to do it where Nora might overhear. Owen's stomach dropped. Samuel knew. Somehow he had figured out how Owen felt about his wife, and he was here to confront him. Owen could not even blame him. He deserved whatever was coming. I am leaving, Samuel said, and Owen stared at him in shock. What? I am leaving, Samuel repeated, dismounting and pacing nervously. There is an opportunity in California, a business venture that could make me wealthy. Real wealth, Owen, not scratching out a living from stubborn New Mexico soil. But it means traveling, being gone for months, maybe longer. And I cannot take Nora and Daniel with me. It is too dangerous, too uncertain. Owen felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. What are you saying? Samuel stopped pacing and looked at Owen directly. I am saying I need someone I trust to look after my family while I am gone. Nora fights me on this, says she does not need looking after, but I cannot leave her alone in that cabin with just a baby for company. And you, Owen, you are the only man I trust with this. You saved their lives once. Will you do it again? Every instinct Owen possessed told him to refuse. Being around Nora constantly, living near her, seeing her every day while knowing she was another man's wife would be torture. But the alternative, leaving her alone and vulnerable while Samuel chased his dreams in California, was unthinkable. Does Nora know about this plan? Owen asked carefully. Samuel's expression turned defensive. She knows about California. She is not happy about it, but she will come around. This is for our future, for Daniel's future. Surely she can see that. Owen doubted Nora saw it that way, but that was between her and her husband. And what exactly are you asking me to do? Move into the barn if you are willing. Help Nora with the heavy work around the homestead. Make sure she and Daniel are safe. I will pay you, of course. I know you would be giving up your job at the ranch. Owen thought about Mr. Peterson, who had been a fair employer, but who would understand if Owen explained the situation. He thought about Nora, alone and clearly unhappy in her marriage, trying to manage a homestead and care for an infant by herself. He thought about baby Daniel, who he had brought into this world with his own hands. I will do it, he heard himself say, but not for pay, for them, because they deserve better than to be abandoned. Samuel flinched at the word abandoned but did not argue. They worked out the details, and Samuel rode off, leaving Owen to wonder what he had just agreed to. When Owen arrived at the homestead 3 days later with his belongings, Nora was waiting on the porch. The expression on her face was complicated, a mix of relief, anger, and something else he could not quite identify. I did not ask for this, she said as he dismounted. I want you to know that. Samuel made this decision without consulting me, like he makes all his decisions. I know, Owen replied, and if you want me to leave, I will, but Samuel is right about one thing: you should not be alone out here. It is not safe. Nora's anger seemed to deflate. I am so tired, Owen. Tired of fighting, tired of trying to make Samuel see me as an equal partner instead of someone to be managed and protected. I love him, I do, but I am not sure he loves me the same way. Or maybe he loves his dreams more. Owen did not know what to say to that, so he just started unloading his things into the barn. Samuel had already left for California the day before, so it was just the 3 of them now: Owen, Nora, and Daniel. The first few weeks were awkward as they established new routines. Owen threw himself into improving the homestead, repairing everything that needed fixing and building new structures that would make Nora's life easier. He built a proper chicken coop and bought laying hens. He reinforced the barn and the corral. He dug a new well closer to the house so Nora would not have to carry water so far. Nora, for her part, insisted on cooking for both of them, refusing to let Owen fend for himself. They fell into a rhythm, eating breakfast together after morning chores, sharing supper in the evening while Daniel played on a blanket at their feet. They talked about everything and nothing, and Owen found himself more content than he had been in years, even with the painful knowledge that this situation was temporary. Daniel was growing fast, becoming more alert and responsive every day. Owen took to spending time with him in the evenings, playing silly games that made the baby laugh. Nora would watch them with an expression Owen could not quite read, soft and wistful and sad all at once. Letters from Samuel arrived sporadically, always full of excitement about his ventures in California but light on personal details. He rarely asked about Nora or Daniel, and Owen noticed the way Nora's face would close off when she read his letters. Winter arrived, bringing cold winds and occasional snow to the high desert. Owen made sure the cabin was properly insulated and kept plenty of firewood stocked. On the coldest nights, he worried about Nora and Daniel alone in the house while he huddled in the barn, but he knew sharing the cabin would be inappropriate no matter how practical it might be. One particularly brutal night in January of 1878, a storm blew in with shocking ferocity. Owen was in the barn, wrapped in every blanket he owned when he heard someone pounding on the door. He opened it to find Nora, bundled against the cold with Daniel wrapped in her shawl. "The fire went out," she said through chattering teeth. "I cannot get it restarted and the cabin is freezing. I know this is not proper, but Daniel needs warmth." Owen did not hesitate. He ushered them inside, settled them near his own small stove, and added more wood until the temperature became bearable. Daniel, oblivious to the drama, fell asleep almost immediately, warm and safe in his mother's arms. "You should have come sooner," Owen said gently, wrapping an extra blanket around Nora's shoulders. "I did not want to impose," Nora replied. "I already feel like enough of a burden." "You are not a burden," Owen said fiercely. "Do not ever think that." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind howl outside. Owen knew he should maintain some distance, should preserve propriety even in this situation. But when Nora leaned against him, seeking warmth and comfort, he found he could not pull away. He put his arm around her, telling himself it meant nothing, that he was simply providing necessary warmth on a cold night. "Owen," Nora whispered, "I need to tell you something. You do not have to tell me anything." "Yes, I do. I have been carrying it for too long and it is eating me alive." She took a shaky breath. "I am in love with you. I have been for months, maybe since the beginning. I know it is wrong. I know I am married to Samuel, but I cannot stop how I feel. And I hope, that maybe you feel the same way." Owen's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. This was the moment he had dreaded and longed for in equal measure. He could lie, could tell her she was mistaken, that he thought of her only as a friend. It would be the right thing to do, the honorable thing. But looking into her eyes, seeing the vulnerability and hope there, he could not bring himself to lie. "I am in love with you too," he admitted, the words feeling like both a confession and a relief. "I have tried not to be, have tried to fight it, but it is like trying to hold back the sunrise. You are all I think about, Nora, but you are married, and I will not be the man who comes between a husband and wife." Tears streamed down Nora's face. "Samuel is gone, Owen, not just physically, but in every way that matters. He chose his dreams over his family. He left us here while he chases opportunities that may never materialize. Is that a marriage? Is that what I am supposed to honor and preserve?" "I do not know," Owen said honestly. "But I know that anything that starts while you are still married to him will be tainted. We will always wonder if it was right, if we did the right thing. Nora nodded, wiping her eyes. You are correct, of course. You are always correct. That is one of the many things I love about you. They did not speak of it again that night, but something had shifted between them. The truth was out in the open now, acknowledged even if not acted upon. When morning came and Owen managed to get the cabin fire restarted, Nora and Daniel returned to the house. But everything had changed. The next few months were a strange kind of torture. Owen and Nora continued their daily routines, but the air between them crackled with tension and longing. They were careful not to touch, not to be alone together more than necessary. But Owen caught Nora watching him when she thought he was not looking, and he knew she caught him doing the same. In March, a letter arrived from Samuel that was different from the others. Owen could see it in Nora's face as she read it, the way all color drained from her cheeks. "What is it?" he asked, worry overriding propriety. Nora handed him the letter wordlessly. Owen read it, his anger building with each line. Samuel was not coming back, at least not any time soon. His business ventures in California had proven successful, and he was establishing himself in San Francisco. He wanted Nora and Daniel to sell the homestead and come join him, but he could not leave his business ventures to come help with the move. "He sends instructions," Nora said, her voice hollow. "As if I am one of his employees. Sell this, pack that, arrange your own transportation across dangerous territory with an infant. Oh, and he has taken up with business partners who share his vision in ways I apparently never did." Owen crumpled the letter in his fist, fury making his hands shake. "This is unacceptable. You are his wife, Daniel is his son. He cannot just abandon you here and expect you to uproot everything on his whim." "But he can," Nora said bitterly. "I am his wife, which means I am his property. I have no legal right to refuse him. If he demands I come to California, I must go. If he demands I sell this place, I must obey." Owen wanted to argue, to insist there had to be another way, but he knew the laws as well as she did. Married women had few rights, few choices. Samuel could dictate Nora's life from hundreds of miles away, and there was nothing either of them could do about it, unless. The thought came to Owen suddenly, shockingly, but once it was there, he could not shake it loose. There was one way Nora could escape Samuel's control, but it would require courage and sacrifice from both of them. "What if you did not go?" Owen said slowly. Nora looked at him in confusion. "I just explained that I have no choice. There is always a choice. It might not be an easy one, but it exists." Owen took a deep breath, knowing he was about to suggest something that would change everything. "You could divorce him." Nora's eyes went wide. "Divorce? Owen, do you know what that would mean? I would be ruined, unmarried, and with a child. No respectable person would associate with me. I would have nothing, no home, no security." "You would have me," Owen said quietly. "If you wanted. I know I have nothing to offer compared to Samuel's success in California, just a cowboy's wages and a willingness to work hard. But I love you, Nora. I love Daniel as if he were my own son. I would spend every day of my life trying to make you happy if you would let me." Nora stared at him, and Owen watched 1,000 emotions cross her face. Fear, hope, longing, doubt, all swirling together into something he could not quite read. "You are asking me to give up everything I have ever known," she whispered. "My reputation, my security, any chance of being accepted in polite society." "I am," Owen admitted. "And I know it is not fair, but staying married to Samuel, following him to California, that is also giving up everything. At least this way, you would be choosing your own path instead of having it dictated to you." Nora was quiet for a long time, staring out at the desert landscape she had come to call home. Owen waited, his heart pounding, knowing that her answer would determine the course of both their lives. "I need time to think," Nora finally said. "This is not a decision I can make lightly." "Take all the time you need," Owen replied, though inside he was screaming with impatience and fear that she would decide he was not worth the risk. 2 weeks passed in tense silence. Nora was polite but distant, clearly wrestling with her decision. Owen tried to give her space while still maintaining the homestead and caring for the practical necessities. Daniel, at least, remained a bright spot, his innocent laughter a reminder of what they were really fighting for. It was a warm evening in early April when Nora finally came to find Owen in the barn. He was brushing down the horse, methodical strokes that gave his hand something to do while his mind raced in circles. "I have made my decision," Nora said without preamble. Owen's hand stilled. "And I want to be with you. I want to build a life together, the three of us, but I need you to understand what this means. The divorce will take time, possibly months. I will have to prove abandonment, and Samuel could fight it if he chooses. During that time, we will be subject to gossip and judgment. People will talk. They will assume the worst about both of us." "I do not care what people think," Owen said firmly. "You say that now, but it will be hard, harder than you imagine, and there is no guarantee it will work. Samuel might refuse the divorce. The courts might side with him. We could go through all of this and still end up with nothing." Owen set down the brush and crossed to where Nora stood, stopping just short of touching her. "I would rather fight for a chance at happiness with you than accept a life without you. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I am willing to do it." Tears filled Nora's eyes, but she was smiling. "Then we do this, together." Owen could not help himself any longer. He pulled Nora into his arms, holding her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. When she tilted her face up to his, he kissed her with all the pent-up longing and love he had been holding back for months. She kissed him back with equal passion, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his. They broke apart eventually, both breathing hard, both grinning like fools. "We should probably not do that again until the divorce is final," Nora said breathlessly. "I want everything to be proper, or as proper as it can be under the circumstances." Owen nodded reluctantly, knowing she was right but already aching to kiss her again. "Whatever you want, I can wait." The process of pursuing a divorce was every bit as difficult as Nora had predicted. They had to travel to Santa Fe to file the papers, a journey that took several days. The lawyers they consulted were skeptical but willing to take the case, especially when Nora produced Samuel's letters as evidence of abandonment. Word spread quickly in Oro Grande about what Nora was attempting. The reactions were mixed. Some people were sympathetic, particularly the women who understood the difficulty of Nora's situation. Others were scandalized, viewing her as a wanton woman who had seduced a cowboy and was now trying to justify her adultery with legal maneuvering. Mrs. Henderson, the midwife, proved to be a staunch ally. She made it clear to anyone who would listen that Owen and Nora were conducting themselves with complete propriety, that Owen still lived in the barn while the divorce proceedings were ongoing. Dr. Phillips also spoke up in their defense, noting that Samuel Vaughn had shown remarkably poor judgment in abandoning his family. But not all voices were supportive. The local minister delivered a sermon about the sanctity of marriage that was clearly aimed at Nora. Several prominent families in town made it known that they would not associate with her. The general store owner was pointedly cold when she came in for supplies. Through it all, Owen and Nora held firm. They maintained separate residences, were never alone together in situations that might fuel gossip, and conducted themselves with dignity even in the face of harsh judgment. It was not easy. There were days when Nora cried from the stress of being ostracized, when Owen wanted to punch every person who looked at her with disdain. Daniel, thankfully, was too young to understand the drama surrounding him. He continued to grow and thrive, taking his first steps in late spring, babbling sounds that were almost words. Owen spent every moment he could with the boy, teaching him about horses and the land, playing games that made him shriek with laughter. To anyone watching, it was clear that Owen loved Daniel with a father's devotion. Samuel finally responded to the divorce papers in June, and his response was not what any of them expected. He did not fight the divorce. Instead, his lawyer sent a letter stating that Mr. Vaughn acknowledged he had failed in his duties as a husband and father, and that he would not contest the dissolution of the marriage. He waived any rights to Daniel, effectively signing away his son without a second thought. He did, however, claim no financial responsibility for either Nora or the child going forward. Nora read the letter with a mix of relief and sadness. "I suppose I should have expected this. Samuel was never one to fight for something once he decided it was more trouble than it was worth." "His loss," Owen said quietly. "Though I admit I am relieved, I was worried he might make this much more difficult." The divorce was finalized in August of 1878, almost exactly 1 year after Daniel's birth. Nora emerged from the courthouse a free woman, legally able to make her own choices for the first time in years. Owen was waiting outside, and the smile she gave him was radiant. "So," she said, walking up to him with a confidence he had not seen in her before. "I believe you made me an offer a few months ago. Something about spending every day of your life trying to make me happy." Owen grinned, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "I did indeed. Does that offer interest you?" "Very much. So what do you say, Owen Jameson? Will you marry me?" Owen laughed, delighted by her forwardness, and dropped to one knee right there on the courthouse steps. "Nora Vaughn, you are the strongest, smartest, most incredible woman I have ever known. You are also a terrible influence who has me proposing in public like a fool. Yes, I will marry you. I will marry you tomorrow if you will have me." "Tomorrow sounds perfect," Nora replied, pulling him to his feet and kissing him right there in front of everyone passing by. They were married the next day by a justice of the peace, with Mrs. Henderson and Dr. Phillips as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony. Nothing like the elaborate wedding Nora had had with Samuel, but it felt more meaningful than any grand affair could have been. When Owen slipped a simple gold band on Nora's finger, promising to love and cherish her for the rest of his life, he meant every word with his entire being. Daniel, now over a year old and toddling around with endless energy, served as their witness in his own way, clapping his chubby hands together when the justice pronounced them husband and wife. The reaction in town to their marriage was divided. Some people congratulated them, genuinely happy that they had found love under difficult circumstances. Others remained disapproving, viewing the whole affair as scandalous. But Owen and Nora found they cared less and less what others thought as they built their life together. Owen officially adopted Daniel shortly after the wedding, giving the boy his surname and all the rights and protections that came with it. To Owen, Daniel had always been his son in every way that mattered, but making it legal felt like completing a circle that had begun on that hot July day in the desert. They kept the homestead, improving it year by year. Owen proved to have a talent for breeding horses, and within a few years, the Jameson Ranch was known throughout New Mexico territory for its quality stock. Nora started a small school on their property, teaching children from surrounding homesteads and finding fulfillment in work that used her sharp mind and love of learning. Life was not always easy. The frontier was harsh, and they faced droughts, harsh winters, and the occasional raid. But they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense. Owen consulted Nora on every major decision, valued her opinions, supported her dreams the way Samuel never had. Nora, in turn, was Owen's greatest advocate, his sanctuary, his home. Daniel grew into a bright, curious boy who loved horses and books in equal measure. He had no memory of Samuel, and while Owen and Nora made sure he knew the truth of his parentage, Daniel never saw Owen as anything other than his father. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged in that desert heat and strengthened through years of love and care. In the spring of 1880, Nora discovered she was pregnant again. Owen was beside himself with joy, though also terrified at the thought of childbirth after what Nora had gone through with Daniel. But this time, everything went smoothly, with Mrs. Henderson in attendance and Owen holding Nora's hand the entire time. They welcomed a daughter they named Sarah into the world. Owen cried when he held Sarah for the first time, overcome with the realization that he had everything he had never known he wanted. A wife he loved beyond measure, a son who carried his name and his heart, and now a daughter who looked at him with eyes that were the perfect blend of his and Nora's. Daniel, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help feed her or fetch things she might need. Watching him with Sarah, Owen felt a deep satisfaction knowing that his children would grow up in a home filled with love and respect, so different from his own lonely childhood. The years rolled forward, marked by small joys and occasional hardships. In 1882, they welcomed twin boys, Benjamin and Thomas, who were as different as night and day despite sharing a face. Benjamin was serious and studious like his mother, while Thomas was wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief. Their family complete, Owen and Nora settled into the rhythms of ranch life. The town of Oro Grande continued to grow around them, becoming more civilized with each passing year. The railroad came through in 1884, bringing new opportunities and connecting them to the wider world. Through it all, Owen never forgot the gift he had been given. Every night, he kissed Nora goodnight and thanked whatever force had led him to that boulder in the desert on that sweltering July afternoon. Every morning, he woke up grateful for another day with his family. Daniel grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the horse breeding operation. He married a sweet girl from town, and Owen and Nora became grandparents in 1895, watching with joy as their son navigated fatherhood himself. Sarah became a teacher like her mother, opening a proper school in Oro Grande that served children from miles around. She never married, content with her work and her independence, and Owen supported her choice completely, proud of his daughter's strength and conviction. Benjamin and Thomas, true to their childhood personalities, went in different directions. Benjamin became a lawyer, using his sharp mind to help people navigate the increasingly complex legal landscape of the territory. Thomas became a cavalry scout, his adventurous spirit finding perfect expression in exploring the wild places that still existed. On a warm evening in July of 1897, exactly 20 years after that fateful day in the desert, Owen and Nora sat on their porch watching the sunset. Daniel's children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Sarah was inside preparing supper, and they were expecting Benjamin and Thomas to arrive for a rare family gathering the next day. "You ever regret it?" Nora asked suddenly. "Giving up the life you might have had for this one?" Owen looked at her in surprise. Even after 20 years together, she could still surprise him with her questions. "Not for a single second, do you?" "Never," Nora replied firmly. I was just thinking about how everything could have gone so differently. If you had not been riding through that particular stretch of desert that day, if you had not stopped when you heard me scream, if you had helped me deliver Daniel and then ridden away, never to return. But I did stop, Owen said, taking her hand, and I did come back, because from the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. My heart knew before my head did that you were the person I was meant to find. That day changed everything, Nora said softly. It gave me Daniel, yes, but it also gave me you. It gave me the courage to claim my own life, to fight for what I wanted instead of accepting what was expected of me. It gave me a family, Owen added. A home. A purpose beyond just surviving day to day. You gave me that, Nora. You and Daniel and all the children who came after. You gave me a reason to be more than I ever thought I could be. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and purple. 2 decades had passed since that hot July afternoon. 2 decades of love and struggle and joy and sorrow and everything in between. They had built something remarkable together, not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a true partnership rooted in mutual respect and enduring love. Inside the house, they could hear Sarah calling them for supper. Daniel's children came running up to the porch, begging their grandparents to tell them stories before the meal. Owen and Nora exchanged a glance, the kind of wordless communication that comes from years of knowing someone completely. Should we tell them about the day you were born? Owen asked the oldest grandchild, a spirited girl named Emma who had Daniel's eyes and Nora's determination. Oh yes, Emma exclaimed. Grandmother says you were there when Papa came into the world. Is that true? It is true, Owen confirmed, settling the children around him while Nora smiled at the familiar story. It was the hottest day I can remember, and I was lost in the desert when I heard your grandmother scream. As Owen told the story, simplified for young ears but no less true in its essentials, Nora watched her husband with the same love she had felt on that desperate day, when he had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to speak. He had saved her life that day, but more than that, he had given her a future she never could have imagined. The children listened with rapt attention, asking questions and gasping at the exciting parts. When Owen finished, describing how baby Daniel had been born under the vast desert sky, Emma turned to her grandmother with wide eyes. Were you scared, grandmother? Terrified, Nora admitted honestly. But then your grandfather appeared, and somehow I knew everything would be all right. He has a way of making people feel safe. Will you tell us about your wedding? Another grandchild asked. After supper, Nora promised. Come on, all of you. Sarah made your favorite meal. The family gathered around the large table Owen had built years ago, expanded multiple times to accommodate their growing family. They held hands while Owen said grace, thanking God for the food, for the family, for the many blessings they had received. As they ate and talked and laughed together, Owen caught Nora's eye across the table and smiled. She smiled back, and in that smile was everything they had been through together, everything they had built, every moment of joy and sorrow and love that had brought them to this perfect evening. Later, after the children had been sent to bed and the dishes were cleared, Owen and Nora returned to the porch. The stars were out in force, brilliant against the black sky, just as they had been on countless nights before. I love you, Owen said, pulling Nora close. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, Nora replied, resting her head on his shoulder. You are my hero, Owen Jameson. Not just because you saved me that day, but because you have spent every day since choosing to love me, choosing us, choosing this life we have built together. They stood there under the stars, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something beautiful from that chance encounter. The desert stretched out around them, vast and ancient and indifferent, the same desert where their story had begun 20 years ago. But they had made this harsh land bloom, had turned isolation into community, had transformed a desperate moment into a lifetime of love. They had raised children who would carry their values forward, had built a legacy that would outlast them both. As they finally went inside to bed, walking hand in hand through the home they had made together, Owen sent up a silent prayer of thanks. For the broken wagon wheel that had stranded Nora in his path, for the courage to stop when he heard her scream, for every choice and chance and miracle that had brought them to this moment. He had been just a cowboy, tracking horses across an empty desert. But fate, or providence, or simple luck had put him in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. And in saving Nora and Daniel that day, he had saved himself, had found the family and love and purpose he had been searching for without even knowing it. That night, lying beside the woman he loved, listening to her breathe in the darkness, Owen Jameson was the most content man in all of New Mexico territory. He had everything a man could want, everything that truly mattered. And it had all begun with a scream in the desert and the decision to ride toward danger instead of away from it. Their love story, born in desperation and sealed in devotion, would endure through whatever years remained to them. They would grow old together on this land they had tamed, surrounded by children and grandchildren who were the living proof of what two people could build when they chose to fight for love instead of settling for less. And someday, when they were both gone, their descendants would still tell the story of how Owen Jameson found Nora Vaughn alone in the desert, delivered her son with his own hands, and rode for help. How he came back, not just once but again and again, until neither of them could imagine a life apart. How love had bloomed in the harshest of places, proving that even in the wild and unforgiving West, hearts could find their home. But that was the future. For now, Owen held his wife close and thanked God for the gift of another day, another night, another moment in the life they had created together. And as sleep claimed him, his last thought was the same one he had every night, that he was the luckiest man alive, and he would spend whatever time he had left making sure Nora and their family knew how deeply they were loved. The end came many years later for both of them, peaceful and surrounded by the family that was their greatest achievement. Owen went first in the winter of 1910, at the age of 59, with Nora holding his hand just as she had held it through every important moment of their shared life. His last words were simple: "I love you, wait for me." Nora followed him 3 years later, having lived to see all her children well established and happy. Her last request was to be buried beside Owen, so they could rest together as they had lived. Daniel, now a grandfather himself, made sure her wishes were honored, placing roses on both their graves and telling his own grandchildren about the remarkable love story of his parents. The ranch continued for generations, the Jameson name becoming synonymous with quality horses and honest dealing throughout New Mexico and beyond. Every child born into the family heard the story of how it all began, that hot July day in 1877, when a cowboy saved a woman in labor and changed the course of both their lives forever. And though Owen and Nora were gone, their love remained, woven into the fabric of the land they had worked, the children they had raised, and the legacy they had built together. They had proven that true love, the kind that endures through hardship and grows stronger with time, was not just possible but worth fighting for, no matter the cost or what society might say. Their story became legend in Oro Grande, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth. But to those who had known them, who had witnessed the quiet devotion with which they treated each other, the respect and partnership that defined their marriage, it was simply the truth. Owen and Nora Jameson had loved each other completely, had built a life that honored that love, and had left the world better than they found it. And that, in the end, was all anyone could ask for: a life well lived, a love well tended, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The desert still stretched across New Mexico, harsh and beautiful and eternal. But where Owen and Nora had made their home, life flourished, testament to what two people could accomplish when they chose each other, again and again, through all the days of their lives.